Yeah, there we go. There we go. Oh, hello and welcome yet again to the Inver and Goblins and Growlers podcast. We're so happy to have you here. My simulacrums are unfortunately in the shop, which means that I'm joined by technically classified as humanoid, but probably going to be reclassified as aberrations, Brandon and Josh.
Whole person ain't got shit on me.
Now, I know it's been hotly anticipated, but the Monster Manual for 2024 came out in 2025, and I know that we promised you all that we were going to dig into it. And because we're super prepared, we were spending a good deal of preparation time tonight trying to figure out where exactly the 85 monsters they promised us were coming from. And that divulged into a whole rabbit hole of things. But let's talk about it.
Yeah. First thing I would like to bring up on this is something I noticed while we were looking through all the paperwork ahead of recording. As you know, we've been making the joke for months and months and months. Oh yeah, the 2024 Monster Manual coming out in 2025. I noticed that they call it 2025 Monsters and 2025 Monster Manual in the book.
Oh.
Yeah.
How odd. What an interesting choice they made.
How odd that they refer to it accurately rather than pretending like they were doing before.
So annoyed.
Yeah, but also,
annoyed.
Yeah, also, if you want to listen to us for about 25 minutes going through a lot of the monsters and chatting about some of the conversions and how silly they are, that'll probably be the first deep dive that goes up from this episode. So just hop on the Patreon, patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers, and join at the $5 tier to be able to listen to that audio goodness.
Now you can be there while we spiral out in insanity, trying to figure out what exactly we're going to put on this show for your listening pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Much as we have done for the last couple of releases for the 2024 rules, we're just going to, I think, kind of speed through things as much as we can, hit the highlights on stuff, and chat about our thoughts and opinions on it, rather than go block by block on things.
You don't want to go through every single monster they've included in this manual in an hour, Brandon?
No, especially not the ones that are almost literally just a different name on an old stat block from 2014, which, spoiler, is more than you think there are.
So before we get started with the Monster Manual, I kind of wanted to ask you all about, have you experienced the implementation of the 2024 player handbook rules and DMG rules through D&D Beyond? That, of course, requires that you actually use D&D Beyond, and you may not, except for the purposes of this show.
Yeah, that's sort of where I'm living, is that I don't, the only reason I use D&D Beyond is because it is an easy and efficient way for us to get the early release versions of some of these books. Because if you sign up for like the master tier, you get them like 2 weeks ahead of the street date. So that's why we're able to take a look at this today. Because as of recording, this just became available yesterday.
Josh, do you use it at all? Just out of curiosity.
Not, but that's mostly because I don't run games outside of our brewery games. And when I'm running games at breweries, I'm not looking at rule books. If we need to check a rule thing, I'm Googling it, and if it's not on Google, I'm making up my own mind. Like it's I do not have time for opening a rule book, finding the specific section that I'm looking for, navigating to it, reading the contents, and then making my ruling. I got 3 hours to get these people in and out their adventure.
Yeah, I'm semi in the same boat because I mainly just run stuff at our brewery games, but I also occasionally run like private game for my high school friends and stuff like that. And I never feel like I have to take it too terribly seriously. So I am not necessarily the right target for the rules revamp, because I think we've talked a lot in the past about how these are really designed now that we're like 10, 11 years on from 5e to bring new people in and sort of hit reboot on a lot of the excitement that we felt when 5e, which I don't care what anybody says, is demonstrably simpler than any edition that came before it and is probably the easiest pick up and play of comparable systems out there. Like for me, it's like okay, these are great as like resources. Like if I ever need some inspiration for a monster, or if I'm just looking for some thoughts on a trap, or just maybe a way of handling something, like looking at those books. But I don't use them necessarily as like day-to-day reference material, like I would say a dictionary or a thesaurus or something.
What about maybe third-party apps that integrate with the rule set, like Avray on Discord or a VTT that might be accessing the rules?
I do have Avray set up on my private Discord, and we used that for when we were running 5e on there before we did our vampire game. We were using that heavily for all the roles and stuff that we were using.
Maybe we could check it during the show, but I'd love for you to just prompt Avray and see what rule set they give us back, because I'm just so curious how the data handling has gone. It's been really fascinating, because you think about Wizards or any TTRPG company, they're going to release a rule set. That rule set has to be translatable across a whole bunch of different systems. And if you were put in the role of Wizards and you had this existing 2014 rule set sitting in your data inventory, feeding information back to all sorts of third-party apps and integrations, what would be your call for, say, let's take the Githyanki stat block, right? They're aberrations, and they're aberrations now, not people. Not people. Those are quotation marks, listener.
I saw you doing finger quotes, and I was like, boy, I hope you're going to say those out loud.
I know. I hope the listener can pick up on the motion.
It's really just finger guns.
You're WotC. You're embedding this change. What do you do with the existing 2014 rule?
I guess it depends really on how much trouble it is to update it, because if everything's supposed to be backward compatible on stuff and I'm Avray, which is free, I'm not making any money off of that necessarily. So I don't know if I'm going to go to the trouble for it. And I went to avray.io while we were talking to see if I could find some information. And I suspect it's still running off the 2014 rules, just because the copyright at the bottom is like 2022. And there's also not where I can see easily like an info page that says, oh yeah, we run these rules. But I'll keep looking, but I don't think I'm going to find it.
What's your verdict, Jish, as head of WotC? How do you treat the 2014 rules, which will have to become obsolete at some point, right?
I think I treat the 2014 rules as archival. As long as I am planning to say everything that we're doing is backwards compatible with this version of the rules, I can't get rid of it. I don't want it gone, because clearly it still has value to me, because I'm not leaving it in the dust. So as long as I am continuing down that particular path, the best thing I can do is gently encourage people to start using the updated rules so that I can sell more books. I think, having said that, I think Avray links to your D&D Beyond. So what I don't know is how that API call works. It's possible that Avray has, since you now have access to 2024 monster rules, it's possible that Avray has access to 2024 monster rules. I don't know. But I also don't know if you just prompt it like, what's the deal with a spell that has changed between 2014 and 2024? If you just say spell and it's like, I can't think of an example, but like Tasha's Hideous Laughter, just as an example of a spell. If there's differences between the 2014 and the 2024 version, and you just say, what are the rules for Tasha's Hideous Laughter? Does it know to give you the updated version because you have the 2024 rules?
I wonder. I wonder if it depends on, in your D&D Beyond account, whether you set the 2014 or 2024 rules as your primary. Because I think that's an option, because I think originally it was supposed to automatically supersede to 2024, and then people got mad and then they made it a choice.
That's a great segue, Brandon. Yeah. That is indeed the next topic I was going towards.
I also just want to mention, I love how Josh is phrasing Avray commands like exclamation point Seinfeld or something like that. Like, what's the deal with Tasha's Hideous Laughter? Yeah, I am, by the way, digging deeper into Avray, and I'm on their documentation page, and it's copyright 2020, like in 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
So like,
I mean,
yeah,
that doesn't necessarily mean anything. People just forget to change that all the time. But
yeah, I bet it is tied to like whatever you set as your primary rule set on D&D Beyond.
That would make sense.
So the initial rollout for the new rules from 2024 was, let's just say, objectively poorly mishandled.
Mm-hmm.
In that, instead of having an option for 2014 and 2024, players signed in to only find 2024 rules applied to all of their characters and spells and campaigns that they had been in for years. And
After
folks,
all the talk about, oh, this is totally optional. We're not going to change anything. You're going to have access to both sets of rules. You're going to keep doing whatever you want to do. Whoever on their code base did an oopsie. And hopefully that was an actual oopsie and not a ha whoops kind of oopsie.
it was a big enough oopsie, at least, to get the whole community enraged, because the D&D community will get enraged about, I mean, anything, really. It's justifiable at this point. But
we don't like change. It's scary.
But this was also from a bunch of people who had bought the 2014 rulebook and didn't want to buy the 2024 rulebook. Like, they were content with just proceeding with D&D back in its glory day and not moving forward with any of its iterations, which, fair. They purchased it on D&D Beyond. It should be available on D&D Beyond. I suppose to some extent, the company... I'm a lawyer. I'm not your lawyer. Please find legal representation if you have a nuanced issue. I suppose the company could, revoke the license that they give to the users, because you don't really own digital content these days. You're just given a license to own it, not even own it, to access it, right? To access it and to allow your friends to access it. And with the shared limited features that they have embedded into D&D Beyond, like GMs can share their library with their players, they try and make that at least useful.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that D&D is kind of in the right, though, to abolish 2014 rules and put up 2024 rules. We don't like it, but...
I don't know if there's I don't know if you can say they're in the right to do that. I think you can say
maybe they gave you a free book out of it.
Yeah. They have the right to do it, but I wouldn't say they're in the right to do it.
From an ethical standpoint, maybe not.
Yeah. So here's my stance on that. Is it would be like Microsoft saying everybody's using Windows 11 now. I mean, all of your Windows 10 users, you're getting upgraded. I don't care that some of the software you use isn't compatible. It's fine. You're getting upgraded to Windows 11. The number of people that would be setting fire to Microsoft offices is very high. Let me tell you right now. Wizards of the Coast does not need to be taking on that kind of steam, first of all. Second of all, if that is the route they want to go, then this needs to be 6th edition. If they want to get rid of 5th edition and they want to be like, hey, 2024 is the hot new thing. If you want to keep playing 2014 rules, sure, you can live in a decade ago, but all of the Adventurers League and the events and things that are happening at Wizards Play stores, etc., all of that's going to be 2024 rules. Then it needs to be 6th edition. If they're going to play this game where they're like, oh, no, you guys, we have so many books that are 5th edition that are still in our warehouses. We want you to keep buying these books. Please, God, keep buying these books. Everything's backwards compatible. You should want to play the new version, but you don't have to.
Now, forgive me, because I don't play Magic the Gathering, despite 30 years of friends trying to get me to play Magic the Gathering.
You don't Magic, bro?
No, I don't Magic, bro. Isn't this sort of aren't we reaching a point where it's kind of this is a version of what Magic does when they deprecate cards and remove them from tournament play? Don't they retire cards after certain periods of time? Yeah,
I think I don't know what they're called, Jish. I'm not a Magic either. I mean, I'm a Magic user, but not a Magic the Gathering player. But wasn't there a balanced review board that just banned a whole bunch of cards that then decided to give up because the player backlash was so severe? I think I remember that being a thing.
There could be a whole episode just about this topic, and I'm not in it enough to be an expert, okay? I am married to a comics and games store owner, and she has kept me in the loop on a lot of this stuff.
Yeah. So all I'm saying is, isn't this similar?
The short answer is not really.
Okay.
Magic the Gathering has what are considered standard sets that are part of tournament play right now. And then they have several other versions of play that are active at any point around the nation. The scandal that Inver is talking about is because there was a fan-based standard called Commander that banned a bunch of cards, including cards that only work in Commander decks, like literally have no other purpose than to be in Commander decks. That group was like, it's too powerful, we're banning it from like league play. And there was a lot of backlash. Not surprisingly, some of the cards were very popular for good reason. And also, one of the cards only works in that variety of play. So if you ban it, what is the point of that card anymore? And that card, as if I recall correctly, wasn't even 2 years old at the point that it got banned. So this is different. And this is different for a lot of reasons. Thing number one, Wizards is only asking us to change from a rule set that they released 10 years ago to the rule set that they're working on now, which I don't see that as wholly unreasonable. If they had said, hey, it's been 10 years, we're doing 6th edition, here's how it's going to work, here's the things we're going to change, for the most part, it's going to be backwards compatible with 5th edition because we don't want to change that much. So if you want to keep using 5th edition books but start playing them in 6th edition rules, you'll probably have to change a couple of things, but you won't have to change much. I think that would be a valid position to hold. That's not what they did. They said, no. This isn't 5.5. This isn't 6. This is still just 5th edition, but newer. Okay? Like, don't even worry about it. It's just new 5th edition.
It's rolled up in a shirt, and it's like in a band t-shirt, and it's saying, how do you do, fellow youths? It's newer, hipper D&D.
And like some of the rule changes I'm in favor of, don't get me wrong. But like, I think if they really wanted people to move to the 2024 rules, this is not the way to do it.
So how this translated into UI, because I walked it back, obviously, like Wizards isn't just going to sit in it. How this translated to the UI is now the spells are accessible in the catalog. So if I was to type in Tasha's Hideous Laughter, I'd get Tasha's Hideous Laughter 2014 or Tasha's Hideous Laughter 2024.
That's rough. That's rough.
Yeah. Good news, players. You can elect whether or not you want the legacy rule set or the current 2024 rule set when you create your character. So there's still some customizability features that way. If you wanted to turn off 2024, I don't want to give you fake news. I think you can. I do know that you can actually actively click on the 2014 rule set along with homebrew and other kind of content that's available in the gallery that isn't necessarily approved by Wizards. So options.
The gallery, it's not easy to navigate.
You want to talk about some UI concerns?
No, I mean, it's like one of the main reasons
UX?
one of the main reasons I don't use D&D Beyond more as like a reference tool is just that navigationally it's clumsy. And I think that probably is a result of just its origins as a fandom site. And I'd hope once Wizards bought it, there would be some work put into revamping the UI, making it easier. Because, like, honestly, if I need to look something up and it's online, probably 9.5 times out of 10, I'd go to Roll20 and look it up because their SRD indexing is really easy to find stuff in. And it's normally one of the top Google results for it too. When I'm like, find me this spell 5e D&D, and then it's Roll20, and that's the only thing I use Roll20 for, because Roll20 has been trapped in 2012 for the last 12 years.
You're not rolling into D&D 5e.wiki.
God, that thing, like any Any D&D wiki, especially the ones that are hosted on like fandom sites. All right, here's a rant. All right, so
strap in, listener, viewer.
I'm a big Star Trek fan, and I make liberal use of Memory Alpha, which is the official Star Trek Alpha Canon wiki, and it was great for a long time because it was a very slim, svelte wiki site, and then it got absorbed into fandom because over the last, I don't know, probably 10-ish years, maybe a little bit less than that, like so many of these like comic book and sci-fi shows wiki sites have been sort of absorbed by fandom, and now it's just this polluted thing of fly out menus and like multiple layers of ads and interstitials and things like that, and it's just miserable to use. So that's one good thing about like D&D Beyond being sort of out of that sphere of influence now. Because what I will say about it positively is that it loads quickly and it doesn't hassle me with like video ads or anything like that. Even if I'm not like a paid subscriber to it, at least I've never run into that to the point where it's been compromising in the way I use it. But it's just not easy to navigate, like having to go to this gallery and look for all the stuff you've got in your library and everything, and not being able to follow links to the one you have. Like if I click on something and I know I've got it in my library, I want to be directed to my library, not the page where I can buy it just so it can tell me that it's in my library. End of rant.
While you were ranting, I was navigating a thing. And just I'll invert. I saw you raise your finger. I will absolutely. This is
Keep
a
it
quick thing.
Yeah,
this is a very quick thing. It is the Monster Manual parentheses 2024 in the sources in D&D Beyond.
Son of a bitch!
Even though the book itself says what's new in the 2025 version, which leads me to believe they're going to keep calling it the 2024 rule set. With the 2025 Monster Manual.
It's fine, guys. It's fine. They're close. They were released close enough together. In 2 years, no one will even remember that it was released in January.
I want on all the official press releases, or just whenever they publicly talk about it, it's the 2024 rule set with an asterisk next to it.
Brandon,
what were you gonna say, Amber?
During your rant, have I not preached the good gospel of ad block extensions to your browser? Because if you have not looked into that, my man, please do. Note that the advertising that you consume online is entirely voluntary. There are ways to avoid it.
Here's the thing. All right. Rant resumed. Here's the thing. I do actually use Ghostery and another ad blocker on my Chrome account. However, what those things don't block is really bloated UI, which is something that fandom has, with shit constantly popping out and just making it a slower user experience.
Okay. All right. You're right about that. Maybe. I'll give it to you for now because I can't confirm whether or not you're right about it. All that aside, let's hope that they do better in migrating the Monster Manual 2024 with the Monster Manual 2014 rule sets, because we saw some really surprising changes this time around, and I'm sure we can get on into it. But first, I want a mini rant. Who's in charge of alphabetizing this thing? Who is it? Which one of you at Wizards is doing this to me? Yeah. Why is ancient and adult dragons listed in A, and I have to search the entire other alphabet for the other chromatic versions of the same dragon? Make it make sense to me, please.
All right. So This is related to something that I talk about at work a lot, because I do a lot of like training and coaching and mentoring on younger employees. Sometimes they're just out of college or whatever. And the primary thing that I see that's missing in their soft skill set is critical thinking. And I think that's what our point
like a business daddy.
Yeah. Well, like, people need to be able to think critically through problems and not just be like, oh my God, we got to alphabetize these, so I gotta do it this way. Like, no, you need to stop and step back and think critically. Like, okay, what's a commonality that all these have? Oh, they're all dragons. Okay, well, maybe the dragons get their own bucket, and then I alphabetize within dragons.
We did it in 2014. D is for dragon. That's what the D stands for.
Yeah. Now, it's important to call out here that our point of reference here is the D&D Beyond version of the book. So if you've got the print version in your hand and you're like, you guys are full of shit because this is alphabetized correctly, fair.
Then tell us in the YouTube comments, you coward.
Yeah, exactly. Tell us in the YouTube comments. And while you're at it, go to linktr.ee/goblins and growlers to see all the different stuff that we do. Click on all our links and join the Discord at bit.ly/goblin discord so you can yell at us in there too.
You know what? I have another call to action for you. As I said at the top of this show, we spent 30, maybe 45 minutes trying to figure out the 85 new monsters that they added to this manual. If you can figure it out before we do, prizes will ensue. What prizes, you might ask? Ones that I entirely figure out on my own when I'm not giving warranties on a show.
Yeah. That's another thing they could have included in this book. It's like, hey, here's the list of the new monsters, but they didn't do that because so many of the new monsters, I think, are just reskins of old monsters with minor changes. I think that's part of that.
I think we should talk about the equivalents, but I want to just clear the room for any other formatting and or minor grievances we might have with this book before.
Josh, do you have a rant?
Well, I was going to say, speaking of things that could have stayed in 2014, challenge ratings are back, baby.
No.
Yeah. I think we're going to have another deep dive about that.
Let me tell you a little something about challenge ratings, okay? They got our hopes up. They got our hopes up in the DMG that we were, maybe mine, maybe because I didn't read it correctly. Correct me in the YouTube comments. But I was under the impression that challenge ratings weren't going to be as big of a deal. Did you share that? Did you share that optimism with me, team?
I thought at the very least we were going to have a better way of calculating them.
How about you, Brandon?
I mean, before we were recording, I sort of articulated the level of usefulness that challenge ratings represent for me. And that is simply to put me in a very large ballpark about whether or not something's appropriate for the party that I've got. Beyond that, I don't really use them all that much. I certainly don't use them for experience calculation because I use milestone leveling all the time because it's way easier and it's more rewarding from a story perspective.
I'm going to read straight off the blog. I think it's maintained by Wizards. The new Monster Manual has made some significant changes to way challenge ratings balance gameplay. That wasn't formatted correctly grammatically. Okay. Anyway, previously, challenge ratings were calculated assuming optimal use of monsters' abilities, which could lead to inconsistent encounters depending on the DM. Now, challenge ratings are designed to reflect a monster's power, regardless of how its abilities are used. Legendary creatures in particular have been returned so that their CR remains consistent no matter which legendary action the DM chooses. The manual also introduces more high CR threats across various monster types, such as Celestials, Fays, and Constructs. Lower and mid-level monsters have been refined for smoother gameplay with adjusted stats and new abilities ensuring balance across all levels. Also, we have higher CR monsters that typically have a challenge rating of CR 21 to 22, so DMs can distinguish. But challenge ratings are still here, and how do you calculate it is the main question. We'll get into that on a deep dive because I don't have time to rant about it on the podcast. But you know, Patreon, enjoy our premium content for a low price, $5 a month. What I did want to talk about with you all on this episode in particular is that they provided a very nice conversion chart that we were all geeking out of before the show. Another deep dive, another plug. But I think that all of you had your own grievances with it. I know I certainly do. What jumped out to you when you saw this chart initially? And listener, viewer, we will post a link to this chart in the show notes so that you can also follow along. If you have bought the book, then you probably have access to it. Can't confirm if this is a free resource. So if you don't have access to the link, find someone who does. Real quick, here's a glance at it. And now it goes away. So we don't get dinged by them.
Incredible.
Welcome back, sharpshooters.
Yeah. All right, Josh, do you want to go first?
Not really. Because I think I'm probably going to be the most irritated about this of the three of us.
Oh, well, we want to save that for last then.
Brando, I think you should kick it off.
Yeah, I mean, at first, my initial reaction to it was like, oh, this is really convenient, allowing you to do like one-to-one comparisons of things. But then it started to get just a little confusing because I was having trouble understanding some of the changes. Like, for example, like Minotaur to Minotaur of Baphomet. There's not, like, from a stat block perspective, there's not a whole lot changing there. Like if I go to the actual if I go to the actual block with all the description and everything, like there might be some differences there, but in terms of numerically, like really it's pretty much the same. So I'm not understanding what the threshold is for like giving a monster a new name. There are some that I understand why they did them, for example. And we talked about this, like some of the fallout from the like homogenization arguments of different species and things like that, like, you know, Dwergar and Drow, the Underdark races wanting to get away from like, oh, they're all evil and things. Like Drow as a monster now translates to priest acolyte. And, you know, the main difference there is whereas Drow was like medium humanoid elf, priest acolyte is medium or small humanoid cleric. So it's trying to generalize it a little bit more. And I can understand why they made that change. But, you know, even some of those don't make any sense. Like we talked about how Drow mage converting to bandit deceiver just doesn't make any damn sense from just a surface level analysis of it. So there's a lot of head scratching in here. You know, I know one of the ones, yeah, I feel like now that I'm thinking about it, we should call out the Gynosphinx, Androsphinx thing. Cause we were talking about Gynosphinx in the deep dive and we were like, oh, you know, like, you know, and I said something like, well, you know, the only way that makes sense is if there's an Androsphinx. Okay. Yeah. The Androsphinx is on here and they did change that one too.
Getting rid of gendered terms for sphinxes. And I think we saw a lot of that kind of language sanitization throughout this list. Like Alpha got axed. All of the Underdark races, to include Deep Gnomes, Dwergar, and Drow, got resanitized into kind of just like generic level bad guys. I thought the tough category was super interesting, and I'm kind of surprised that you took both the Sphinxes and the Drow on that one, Brandon, because I was almost certain that it was going to be the tough class that you were going to.
I was scrolling through and just happened to see the Sphinxes, and I was like, oh, I better mention this before I forget it. But you talked about Alpha getting axed. One Alpha that's not axed is Alpha Comics and Games at conveniently located at Richmond's Willow Lawn. Support them. They carry a lot of our merch. Support your friendly local gaming store.
And you might be asking yourself, viewer, listener, what is a tough exactly? Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you asked. Let's talk about it. Yeah. Tough is replacing thug and orc on our list. Yeah. And I think that's mostly because, again, with the same Drow argument, this is a species that we want players to be able to play and pick up and not feel immediately vilified within the game. Also, it's D&D, so of course the blatant racism and stereotypes kind of fell into that as well. Now we have tough, and we're assessing our new racism and stereotypes and classism in 2025.
Yeah.
Brandon, I feel like I read the tough description before. I'm happy to read it again just so we can record your reactions. But if you feel like you can put the proper emphasis on it, I would love to have you do it instead. Yeah.
All right. So the description of toughs, which replaced thugs, and obviously thugs has real world racial implications. So I think it's good that they changed that. But toughs is bodyguards, belligerents, and laborers. Toughs rely on their physical strength to intimidate foes. They might be brawny criminals, rowdy tavern goers, seasoned workers, or anyone who uses their muscle to get what they want. And if you want to play like a Sesame Street game of one of these things is not like the other, I think seasoned workers is the one that stands out there among brawny criminals, rowdy tavern goers, or anyone who uses their muscle to get what they want.
But wait, Brandon, we have more. There's also the orc war chief who got transformed into the tough boss.
which sounds like an A&E or History Channel reality show or something like that. But I thought that was interesting though, that they just added boss to it to make it work.
It's like those JRPGs where there's just loads of one monster and then the boss monster is just 10 times bigger than the other little ones running around.
Or just a palette swap of the original one.
That is what that feels like. And I understand their impulse because it's very much like we want to provide you with monsters and enemies and bad guys just generally that doesn't offend anyone and can be found anywhere. And when you do that, you kind of lose some of the special things that made that enemy so interesting to fight in the first place. I'll note that writing for Goblin games, it has been difficult because if you think about what is a goblin's natural enemy, it's more than likely adventurers, right? That's the number one thing. Let's go out there trying to get rid of goblins, destroy on sight. Maybe it's wild animals that you can get away with, but wild animals
City
are only
guards.
Yeah.
Some abominations, perhaps. They're non-discriminating for the most part, right?
I'm reading that because on the stat block for tough on D&D Beyond, there's comments on it from users. And my favorite is the second one from somebody named Gamble, Gambal. And they say, I guess strongs didn't sound good enough. But, my main complaint was this is like, you're basically lumping like any kind of stevedore, like warehouse worker, anything like that into this group, like any teamster or something, because they're seasoned workers who generally use their muscle. So they're automatically toughs. So they're in the same bucket as drunks and criminals.
I will repeat here the same thing I said when this first came up, which was it might, and this might be giving them too much credit, it might just be that is written there as this is an example of an occasion you might use this stat block. Mm-hmm. So if your party is in a warehousing district and they get in a fight with a bunch of dock workers outside of a tavern because they knocked over their motorcycles or whatever, like you might use this stat block for that.
I'm imagining like an episode of Batman 1966 where Batman and Robin are fighting a supervillain called like the Shipwright or something. And all of his henchmen are a bunch of stevedores in like 1800s stevedore clothing. And you just use this stat block.
Yeah.
I think that it at least makes the customizability maybe a bit simpler. Okay, let's pretend I've never played D&D before. Do I really care who Lolth and Baphomet and Grumush and any of the other kind of named entities that make these enemies interesting are? If I'm just a DM, right? Mm-hmm. And I need to figure out some stats for my bad guys, is toughs enough to get me started? Like I can obviously change the name, but
it is. I mean, if I look at this objectively, like I have no problem with it just because a more generic stat block is easier to deal with. And this is coming from a guy who tends to use a bare stat block for every enemy that he's got and just adjust some numbers on it, right? Because the more generic the stat block, the more you're able to easily reskin it to just whatever need you have at that particular level of play that you're at. If you're still like low level and you're dealing with a lot of like ground level, like, Spider-Man, Iron Fist, Luke Cage levels of troubles that you're trying to fight, then this would probably be a great stat block to use for just like minions and mooks and stuff like that. Like the tough boss, like if you're fighting the Kingpin or something and you're those guys, that's probably the stat block you want to use. It just makes it a lot easier to translate.
Whether or not they're laborers and have formed a union, but that's up to your GM, right? Maybe the union features make them have like a legendary action after they've signed it.
Their
bargaining.
Their bastion is a union hall.
Ooh, yeah.
We're giving bastions to the mobs now. Yes.
Hey, they earned it. They earned it through the sweat of their brow.
If every player gets a bastion, every monster gets a bastion. That's the rule that I'm operating with.
And not one of those shitty townhouse bastions that has a shared wall with the neighbor.
Oh my God.
Okay, we digress. Some other like kind of general changes that I found were that they were adding in a lot of variations. So something similar to what we saw in like, was it Mordekainen that gave us the different skin textures of the beholders? It was one of those that was like, here are all the unnecessary flavors for your beholder.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that, except they're grouping it by monster type, and then they'll have a couple of variations of like warrior, captain, bandit, and other fun, flavorful, generic terms to kind of distinguish the class archetypes between each monster. Did you guys dig into this at all? Did you see any variations that you thought were particularly clever? I know the ones that I saw were kind of simple.
Not particularly clever. I enjoyed the tables because most of it's like, oh, here's a table of different things you can do with this, and here's a table of different things you can do with this. I did appreciate that, like, the Kuo-toa have, like, an entire range of, like, here are places you might find Kuo-toa, and here are varieties of Kuo-toa you might find in those places. Like, that sort of thing is kind of fun. I enjoyed that.
I'm so excited that the Kuo-toa are getting a glow up. Like,
they
a race
deserved
that
it.
can conjure up gods just through collective thought is just, it's a beautiful concept.
It's so good.
I love how they're also spotlighting the automotive culture of the Kuo-toa with the Kuo-toa whip getting its own stat block. Josh appreciated that.
All right, let me go in on this monster conversion table before we move away from it. So
Yeah.
Here's my thing. If you were going to do a 6th edition, this makes sense. If you're doing an update to 5e, this does not make sense. You do not need all these stat blocks because most of them are just changes to names. Most of them are. I've looked. The majority that I have seen are just name changes. That's all they are. So that you can take up more space in the book.
But there's 85 new monsters, Jish. Are you calling WotC liars about that?
I mean, I don't know about that, but like I haven't counted. We tried and we didn't quite make it, and that's okay. But my point being, if you're going to keep the 5e rules, keep the 5e rules. Don't go back and be like, oh, I should call the Cyclops a Cyclops Sentry. And I should call a like fairy dragon that's red, orange, or yellow a fairy dragon youth. Like, that's nonsense. It's nonsense. Just have the old stat block at that point and then have the new stat block. Like, change your versioning at that point. Like, what are you doing? You don't need... all of those rules are still accessible. And most of these things are in the SRD. So it's not like they're inaccessible to people who haven't bought. Those would be the only exception to this that I'm talking about, is if they are monsters that are in the 2014 rules, but you have to have the monster manual to gain access to them. If they are only in a book that you have to purchase from the 2014 rules, then yes, valid. Put it in this book. Totally reasonable. If they are in the SRD, I do not want to see them in this book. That is ridiculous.
Wait, so that would be your call? You would just remove all repeating monsters? But what if they gave it 2 extra hit points like they did with goblins? And then classified goblins out into like different variants?
It's unacceptable. If you're going to rebuild monsters, actually do the work of rebuilding them. Like, make different stats for the monsters so that people can be like, oh, I try to use the 2014 goblins for my starter parties, but if they're like really tactical, I'll use the 2024 goblins because there's a little bit more like fun stuff that I can do with those goblins. But the 2014 ones are a lot simpler for me to just look at the stat block. If it was something like that, totally valid. If all you're going to do is change the name from Swarm of Quippers to Swarm of Piranhas and literally nothing else.
Quippers just wasn't selling.
Yeah. Well, like with like monodrone, for example, like if that converts to the modron monodrone. And I think primarily this change was done so they could group everything under modron, since they've got 5 different kinds of modron in here, like the mono, the duo, and everything. But there was like the dex changed by 1 point in the transfer, and they gained like an immunity to being charmed, which makes sense, I guess, for a more machine oriented life form. But again, like I think that's where we're sort of at a hair splitting point. Like, was it change for the sake of being able to say we changed that?
Well, so for the Modron, I think that's okay, because as I said before, if it's something that's in the 2014 rules, but you have to get the book to gain access to it, I'm fine with that being in this book, so that you don't go, oh yeah, I know you love Modrons, but all of our new Modrons are in here, and if you want the base Modrons, you have to buy the other book. I think that would be unpopular.
You need the modern Modrons, not the obsolete Modrons.
We need the models of major Modron generals. I think it's fine to have those be in there. Like anything where it's like, this is specific to the 2014 Monster Manual. We included it here as well. We did a couple of tweaks and updates on it while we were at it, since we changed the rules enough that we felt like that was justified. Playtesting showed that this became too weak a monster, whatever it may be. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that. If all you're doing is changing the name and then making a stat block that's in the SRD in this book, you are wasting space and paper and ink, and stop it.
And my time.
There's a little bit of that too, let's be honest.
I'm trying to find Gold Dragon, but I would love for one of you to pull it up on the 2024 rule set, because I think this is beyond 20, and that's not helpful. I'm having a hard time. I wonder why. I'm having a hard time accessing the particular stat block I needed at any given time, because now I have to filter through whether it's a 2014 or a 2024. I will tell you that there are some key indicators to look for. Initiative is up at the top of the sheet. You'll find general gear that the monster has on it. So if you're generating loot for after an encounter, then you'll typically find the gear alongside it. And one of the few things that they did was they combined some legendary actions or special attacks into a single attack. For the Gold Dragon, it's called Rend, and I'd love for you to read it to me if you have it open, Brandon.
Yeah. Rend, melee attack, roll, +6, reach, 5 foot, hit, 9, 1d10 +4, slashing damage. Yeah,
so that Rend ability is a combined aspect of a couple of other ones. I can't pull them off to the top of my head right now, but this is the kind of philosophy that they're following, is that they want to get rid of all of the various attacks that were available in 2014 and kind of simplify it so that it is one big attack and it's no longer overwhelming the GM with things that they could have done during the fight but just didn't get to. And also, I think probably balance it to fit their new CR rating system, which we'll get into in the deep dive.
Yeah.
This one is a CR. Do you know what it is? Ooh.
It's a CR3.
A CR3. Okay. For a Gold Dragon, is this just a regular?
That's the Wormling. That's the Wormling. Let me. Do you now? Which Gold Dragon from the menu do you want? Do you want the Wormling? Do you want the young? Do you want the adult? Or do you want the ancient?
Ancient.
Ancient is CR24.
Okay. All right. Cool. That gets us up to our legendary CRs, so we know what to. We know. What to look for.
And the art for it is actually pretty baller too. It's that I would love to have a poster of that somewhere in my house where appropriate.
That is pretty cool. I won't lie.
Yeah.
Although WotC artists have been crushing it for a very long time. Like, full props to the WotC art team, because they are doing good work. As much as I complain about things that WotC is putting in books and making excuses to put in books, I love all of the art pieces that I see in the various books that I purchase.
Mm-hmm.
In addition to combining attacks, we also have a look at the new D20 test terminology, where you might maybe call this a D20 check, right?
Mm-hmm.
Referring to any skill checks, ability rolls, and any other time that you might throw the D20. But now they're kind of broadening it out, as opposed to calling for specific skills, like roll me a sleight of hand or roll me a stealth check. I might say, roll me a dexterity D20 test. It's clunky, but you see what they're trying to go for, right?
They're trying to make it simpler.
Mm-hmm.
From a GM organizational standpoint, I think, at least the GM organizing it in their head, but it sounds really clunky.
Roll me a dexterity check probably would have been sufficient.
Yeah. Roll me a dexterity. Well,
that'd be like, what one? I mean, I said, well, it's not a save, so it would be a skill check, right?
Yeah, but you would have to add whatever your proficiency in that was anyway. So just call it out.
Unless you don't care what dex skill is used.
Mm-hmm.
In which case, you can just say dex skill check.
True.
The text looks cleaner a little bit. Like, I will grant. Although they took away change shape.
They consolidated it into a shape change spell. That's in their...
Oh, I see it now. It's under at-will spells.
Mm-hmm.
Beast or humanoid form only. No temporary hit points gained from the spell, and no concentration or temporary hit points required to maintain the spell. I mean, that is, I will grant, is a hell of a lot simpler than the 7-line paragraph that the change shape ability is on their previous stat block.
The legendary monsters also got new legendary actions, which would be really fun to dive into individually. I'm sure for an individual deep dive for each one. You know what, viewer, listener, you've stuck around for 53 minutes and 29 seconds. You tell us. Not counting cut time. You tell us.
I was going to say, I'm really excited to know what the actual timestamp is.
Tell me in the YouTube comments. Listen, I received no other feedback unless it's in that format. You want to summon me? You do it there. Or I will ultimately look at it a month from when I asked you to do so. But if you've been listening this long, you tell us which monster stat blocks you'd like us to review. Bonus points if they're legendary. Bonus points if they're problematic. What happened to Yugoloths? No one knows. It's not in the book, bro.
Bro.
Well, you still got the 2014 rules. You can always pull them from there.
Yeah, so, I wonder, just outside maybe the scope of this conversation, but I wonder how long it will be until like people who say like, oh, well, you can still play the 2014 rules are looked at the same way that people who used to say like, well, you can still play 3.5.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah. How long until am I out of touch? No, it's the children who are wrong.
I don't know. I think in a year it's going to be like, well, you can still play D&D. That's fine.
Yeah, possibly.
After everything WotC did to their fan community, are you sure?
Another bonus, speaking of some fan service, that they gave us in this monster manual is blurring the gender lines. We now have 2 options. Ever so slightly blurred. 2 options of gender identity for our hag, satyr, and succubus monsters, which I'm into. I feel like the reverse of a succubus is an incubus, and I don't know why we're changing that so much, but to each their own. Maybe we just want to throw a succubi party and not define gender, and I'm fine with that.
Yeah. Would a hag be a hog? Is that the male form of hag?
I don't know. I think it's going to look like just a cute, wizardly old man with maybe a couple of druidic growths out of his beard.
Mm-hmm.
Or
are they going to call a male succubus a succuboy?
No. Wait, but can we make stickers of that though?
Sure.
Whatever you're willing to draw, and for whatever you're willing to draw.
Suck your boy will suck your boy.
Whoa.
Okay, well, before I monopolize this entire conversation with what I thought was interesting, also bonus NPC CR ratings now. Yay. Well, but it's good. They need to refresh. They capped out at like CR3 in 2014. So now they have a respectable cap of CR11 for whenever you want to throw them. Tough boss at them.
Ruin them.
But to avoid monopolizing, was there any things that stood out to you in this new 2024 edition in this year 2025?
Go ahead, Josh.
I still don't like that Githyanki and Githzerai are now aberrations and not humanoids. That messes me up on so many levels. And the fact that the other option, you've got hold person, your other spell is hold monster, is the only one you can use on them, is like, so they're not people then, is what you're telling me.
Wait, I got a question.
They're not allowed to be people. Yeah.
Is hold person restricted to humanoid?
Yep.
Oh, so that means it doesn't work on goblins either, which are now officially fae.
As long as
I
it's
respect that though.
As long as it's a tiny creature, you can cast Hold Me Closer, Tiny Dancer.
Ooh.
Yeah. I always like the silence after my jokes, because that's when you know it's really landing and being absorbed by the audience.
Brandon, I feel like, at the end of your life, it's just gonna be you telling jokes in a room.
Probably. That'll be my hell, I think.
Oh no.
Yeah, I have some thoughts about the whole reclassification thing is problematic. Again, whole person is problematic. It should just be hold target. We talked about this at length in the deep dive, which you can go access for the low price of $5 a month if you subscribe to our Patreon. Also, rate us on our YouTube comments, because that's my main one.
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess my biggest thing is, as with so many things that I've complained about, I wish it were more different to justify the fact that it is being republished.
That's about where I am too. Like, if I don't want to get like into the weeds on it or anything, but like looking at it from kind of a macro level, like this is more of a reissue than anything else. Like, it's closer to a reissue than something wholly new. And while that's not entirely unexpected, it's mildly disappointing. If they're not willing to go as far as to say like it's 6th edition or even calling it 5.5, then, my expectations were properly set. I think that it wasn't going to be some big like creative swing with all kinds of cool new monsters. But at the end of the day, like, that's not what they're here for. Like, Wizards is here to provide the foundation to let third parties create the cooler monsters. Like, if you want cool monsters, go to Kobold Press, go get Tome of Beasts, or Tome of Beasts 2 or Tome of Beasts 3, or however many Tome of Beasts there are, because that's where that's the cool kids table in terms of monsters.
Ooh, I have books I can pick up after this. Good. Okay, well then I guess my last question to end us out, and then Tish, you can do the thing. Monster Manual. Do we even use it anymore? Question mark.
Yes, asterisk, because like I said, I use these kind of for inspiration on things, or looking for just a generic stat block or something. But that might just be the kind of person I am when I'm putting stuff together, because I'm not like sitting there like poring over every page trying to find the perfect monster for the encounter I'm trying to design. For me, like, the encounter is part of the story, but it's an interlude in the story. And I much more enjoy the other pillars of the game rather than combat. So I'm not going to sit here and pore over it and use it as an encyclopedia like some people will.
How about you, Jish?
I like monsters a lot. And the monsters in here that are new and have had significant tweaks, I'm genuinely interested in comparing, like, how does this version run versus the previous version I used to use. I think that stuff is fun. I think that stuff is fascinating. I think the thing that kills me with this is there's enough stuff that's similar enough that it's like, well, I could have made that tweak myself on the fly. I didn't need you to do it and then publish it and then sell it to me as an additional book. But I don't have the option anymore of purchasing a couple of cool monsters out of a book because they took that functionality away from D&D Beyond.
Mm-hmm.
So I got what I got.
Oh man, I've been writing stories long enough now that it's helpful to lean on it for maybe figuring out what kind of balance I would want to bring to a fight. I love a fight, but I follow my own rules when it comes to a fight. You know, I want to make sure that there's and we'll talk about it too. I want to make sure that there's enough monsters for everyone to get a victory punch in. I want to make sure that there's enough layer actions to keep it challenging and not routine. I want to make sure that I have some, like, reverse cards for my monster in case I want my monster to stay alive, right? Like, just the basics, just girl things. And I remember when I first picked up the 3.5 Monster Manual and every iteration thereafter, and how I would kind of treat it like, I don't know, there are always like lonely evenings as a GM when you're just planning your sessions and you're flipping through and you're trying to find things that inspire you. And honestly, I'm not inspired by the toughs. I wish that there was a little bit more creative concept planning in this book. And maybe I didn't read it. Maybe I didn't read that part of it because I am working off of the D&D Beyond version of it, which means that I have an alphabetized list of every stat block, and I have them listed by terrain, and I have them listed in their cross-reference sheet. But when it comes to making the actual encounters themselves, I have to lean on the DMG. And I just said, I wish that there was that source of inspiration a bit more in these books. That said, do we use a monster manual?
Yeah. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes, if it informs the setting that we're going to play. And speaking of settings, I heard that this one came with a free one. So, Brandon, you want to maybe tease the audience with what we might be doing with that?
Yeah, the free one, the name of which escapes me at the moment because I closed the window when you said that we weren't going to talk about it. So
it was, what was it? It was something like Death Holds Me or something.
Yeah, Hold Back the Death or something like that.
Hold Back the Dead.
Okay. Yeah, Hold Back the Dead. Yeah, we were gonna try and do a deep dive on it, but it's actually like there's a lot there, and so there wasn't time to really go through all of it. But we'll probably either see about running that on a stream, no promises, or maybe record like a quick video or something that we can put up on YouTube or Patreon or something for that once we get a chance to take a look at it. It just wasn't in the cards for tonight, but make sure you claim it because it's free. On D&D Beyond, and it's associated with the release of the Monster Manual. And it involves a Lich, who is not Vecna.
Another red wizard. Ooh. So we might stream it and then also disclose our real world issues with trying to access the monster blocks as we do so. So stay tuned.
Yeah. Josh, I think you could tell them what they need to know.
Well, for starts, as always, they should telephone, telegraph, tell a friend about the Goblins and Growlers podcast because word of mouth is not just the best Ludicrous album. It is also the best way to get the word out about us as a show, as a group, as an organization. There's so many things that we do that we cannot do without the support of listeners like you, to quote NPR from all of my growing up. We are fully dependent on our audience for so many things because we spend all of the money that is raised with the organization on the organization. So y'all are the ones who really get us out there and make everything possible. So thank you so much for everything that you do. If you want to be more involved in the community, come join our Discord at bit.ly/goblin discord, where you can hang out with, I'm there way too much, frankly. I need to spend less time there and more time actually working at work. But I'll handle that when I come to it. You can find our social media presences and Brandon's lovely newsletter at linktr.ee/goblins and growlers. He produces it once a month, and it's like a 5-minute read. It's so easy to digest. And if you're interested in the little snippets, the little samplings that he gives you, the amuse-bouche of TTRPG content, he always includes links so you can go find the stories for yourself and get a little bit more engaged in whatever he's highlighted for the month. And there's a lot of cool stuff in there.
And you can be the actually guy at your TTRPG table, because you'll be on the cutting edge version of all TTRPG news.
The most cutting edge.
Slashing damage.
If you have been hearing us talking about how you should be on the Patreon at the $5 level, but you don't know where the hell that is, that's patreon.com/goblinsgrowlers to join up there. You can also follow us on Twitch, where we do occasional streams. We've been trying to do a once a month world building stream, and we've been holding that fairly steady. But we might start adding like a once a month or so, maybe once a quarter is more realistic. Gaming stream. That's twitch.tv/goblins_and_growlers, which is a big mouthful, but easier to type.
You could even peer pressure us into playing Hold Back the Dead.
It's true. You could be like, no, actually, I would really like to see you play Hold Back the Dead. Please play Hold Back the Dead. And we'll be like, oh, man.
And just as another
do it.
Just as another pitch for the world building streams, last Saturday when we did one, we ended up doing a monster block and created this guy, Richard Spiderhands, who's a very amiable everyday guy who just happens to have huge spiders for his hands.
The tagline
That's how the web comes out.
The tagline for Richard Spiderhands is the story of an uncommonly crawly fellow. He was always meant to be an Edward Scissorhands joke, and gosh dang it, we delivered.
I'm very proud of you, babies.
Yeah, it's good stuff. Is that it, Josh?
I think the only thing I have left is that you should check out our sister show, Quid Pro Roll, on your podcatcher of choice. We're coming up on the end of campaign 1. So if you're looking to pick up the series so that you can be there for the finale episode, now honestly is the time to get on board.
How many episodes are y'all up to now?
Oh my gosh, it's like 230 something. But we have recaps. We have recaps at the beginning of every arc. So all you have to do is listen to like 7 episodes and you'll be up to the most recent arc. You do not need to listen to all 230 something episodes.
240 as of today.
Oh God, it's too many. So yeah, listen to the recaps and then listen to the current stuff. And then if you're like, you know what, I'm really enjoying this, I wish there were more. Great news, there is.
All right. I think we'll call it there. Thank
you, everyone, for listening to the Inver and Goblins and Growlers podcast.
I'm not changing the logo.
That was the Inver and Goblins and Growlers podcast. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you, everyone, for being a supporter of our Patreon. And we will see you next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.